This video describes the gameplay of Vermintide 2 and provides my thoughts about playing the game and my reaction to Darktide. Alright, I do not always play video games, but when I do, I play Warhammer video games. That's mostly true. In either case, over the last few years, I've really enjoyed playing the odd game of Vermintide. The original game was great, and in my opinion, Vermintide 2 was even better. The Vermintide games are a first-person, action-based video game developed and published by a company called Fat Shark. The employees of Fat Shark were basically long-term fans of Warhammer Fantasy. They'd wanted to make a Warhammer game previously, and they were very eager to work with Games Workshop to faithfully create the franchise. So in Vermintide, players can team with up to 3 other players, or just bots, to fight against hordes of enemies in a playstyle that is often compared to the Left 4 Dead series. In the original game, you fought off waves of Skaven, hence the name Vermintide. But in Vermintide 2, you also fight against mixed forces of Rotbloods and Chaos, which is like a Chaos Nurgle warband, as well as Skaven. Exciting for me, the Winds of Magic DLC also added Beastmen into the mix, which I love. And honestly, the format of the game would basically work for any of the enemies of the Empire, including undead or orcs. So perhaps they will make a showing in future games. Vermintide is set in the Warhammer Fantasy universe during kind of the final days of the end times, when the Skaven have largely overrun the Empire. There is in-game dialogue about resistance and other people fighting to survive, but you rarely see any living people in the game, other than a few farmers that you have to rescue. To complete a mission, there are a series of objectives that the team needs to complete. Basically, just move from point A to point B, but sometimes you need to stop and survive for a period, or move as kind of a series of items while defending against unlimited waves of attackers. Finally, if you are successful, the team needs to escape through a portal. That can be a little tricky at times if there's just 1 or 2 people left alive. There's usually 1 or 2 enemies right at the very end that can trip you up. In the first Vermintide, the team was extracted by boarding a covered wagon. But you would have to go up this ramp in order to get into the wagon, and sometimes players would get stuck on the wagon, and the wagon would get filled with enemies. It was a mess, but it had its funny moments. The transition to just a portal was a good idea. There are different levels of difficulty that increase the number and health of the enemies, but what provides the game its flavor is its randomness. There are basic Skaven slaves, clan rats, storm vermin, plague monks, kind of like a Rotblood zombie, marauders, 2 different types of chaos berserkers. There are chaos warriors, which are among the hardest enemies, Ungor raiders, Gors, and Vestigors. Specific missions lean into the Skaven, while others focus on chaos or beastmen. But often it can be a random combination. Sometimes you'll fight both. Sometimes beastmen will just show up. Enemies are spread out throughout the map, again in a very random manner. So you can never quite be certain what is around the next corner. You'll also encounter random patrols of harder enemies that can be avoided if you are patient. You can hear them marching around, and you can, often a lot of people just go in guns blazing and try to kill them just for fun. That's usually what I like to do, but there are some people that really are cautious about it and try to go around them. Importantly, there is also no radar in this game. So you are constantly checking to make sure no one is running up behind you, and getting hit in the back is pretty common. As you progress, you pass what are essentially hidden checkpoints. Now, we are Warhammer players, so I like to think about this using kind of this type of analogy, where there are dice being rolled constantly in the background. That's essentially what's going on in terms of the mechanics of the programming. You know, it is an absolute certainty that random enemies will show up, but depending on the results of those invisible dice, there are several different possibilities. It can be an ambush, where you will receive a little bit of an auditory forewarning. You can hear them snickering to each other, and then they will kind of immediately surround you. It can be a horde that contains a mixed variety of enemies that will simply run towards you. It could be a special enemy that includes kind of a poison wind globadier, a rat catcher, a rattling gun, a warp fire thrower, a gutter runner, a chaos sorcerer. It could also be a monster like a rat ogre, storm fiend, chaos spawn, or minotaur. Where it gets interesting is that these things could all occur at basically the same time. Right? If you just roll a series of 6s in the background, or what have you, and depending on the combination and timing, that can either be easy to deal with or extremely challenging. Like a horde showing up or an ambush, that itself doesn't matter that much. But you could be fighting a monster at the same time that a horde arrives, and a rat catcher, and a rattling gun, and a chaos sorcerer, all at the same time. And those weird combinations can really trick you up, if you kind of get the idea here. So Vermintide is a strange game because most of the mission you could be doing great, and then all of a sudden you get picked off in a brutal manner, right? You can get out of it, but you need to act quickly, as some of the enemies can take a player out of action until they had been killed. So like the kind of the rat catcher guy, he grabs a player around the neck with this little hook, and it'll drag the player away until they're dead. Or an assassin will jump on a player and just repeatedly stab them until they're dead. And another player has to kill that enemy in order to recover that person. So you can just get in situations where 2 or 3 of the party are just immediately taken out of action. And if those other 2 aren't working quickly enough, you're all dead. So things like potions, health packs, and ammunition are also randomly placed throughout the map. Again, harder difficulty has less of those. Throughout every mission, there are 3 hidden tomes and grimoires that you can pick up as a team. These either reduce health or take up like a potion or health pack slot. They make the mission harder, but they increase the rewards at the end. There are 4 basic characters you can play: an Empire soldier, an elf, a bright wizard, and a witch hunter. Each has 3 basic subclasses, and these can change the nature of the character. For instance, the elf can basically be a wood elf, a high elf, or dark elf. And recently, a 4th subclass has been added, and that means that the Empire Soldier can now be a Bretonnian Knight, which is interesting. And very recently, the Dwarf can now be kind of an engineer, but he uses like a Gatling gun, which makes me really feel that it has like a strong Caradron Overlord feel. Overall, most gamers think highly of the game. It has like somewhere around 80 to 90% kind of positive reviews. But some of the DLCs have not been well received. The Beastman one, there's kind of a sub-game called Weaves. I haven't played it much at all. I do like the Beastman being introduced, so I give it 2 thumbs up, even if I never play the other content. It is a Warhammer game, and it is not uncommon to interact with other people in the game that also know the tabletop games. Usually I ask people, hey, do you play the game or what? Some of them do, some of them don't. So here is my verdict of the game. I've played Vermintide 2 somewhere around 120 hours. And it is a great game. It has an amazing dark atmosphere and fun dialogue between the characters. I like the fact that it can be challenging. It is very action-based, and it's a great use of the Warhammer IP. I think most importantly, it is entertaining enough to be enjoyable, but not enjoyable enough to consume your life, as some other games do. A lot of people tend to be upset when the party gets wiped or killed in some horrific manner. I tend to think that is rather hilarious. I usually am laughing hysterically when everyone dies. It's usually just the perfect storm of just Skaven madness. Two people are getting dragged off, and another third person's getting hacked apart by an assassin, and the other is surrounded by Skaven slaves. I just think it's funny. So ultimately, you can complete missions to gain better gear, so that you can play harder levels of difficulty to get even better gear. Now, I don't care about that too much. I don't like that type of treadmill. Tombs and Grims increase the odds of getting better gear, but the drop rate is quite ludicrous. And I have 3 pieces of red gear that I've really just kind of recently acquired, and I've been playing 120 hours. Like, it's not that bad. It's not that great to kind of get that type of gear. And honestly, even if when I have that type of gear equipped, I don't notice enough of a difference to make me care. It's a lot of extra work for the smallest increase in reward. I am interested only in the visceral action and killing as many enemies as I can, and for that, Vermintide is great. I know a lot of people like video games for stress relief. Hacking apart Skaven, that's pretty good. Especially once you get really good at it, you know what you're doing, you know how to play the game well, you have some decent gear so you're not just a pushover. Yeah, it's nice. Alright, so let's talk about Darktide. Now, late last week, the gameplay preview for Darktide was released. Darktide is the upcoming 40k version of Vermintide, produced by the same company. This looks good, and I will definitely try it out. I'm expecting a gameplay very similar to Vermintide, right? Vermintide 1 and Vermintide 2 are essentially exactly the same, but the 40k environment should be a fun place to explore. Beyond Ungor Raiders and the occasional rattling gun, there are a few ranged enemies in Vermintide. And so naturally, Darktide, I suspect, will lean a little more in that direction. There are plenty of ranged weapons in Vermintide. I shoot crossbows, and I think the video you're seeing here, I use the bow quite a lot, so you'll see that. But that said, as you can see in the video of Darktide that I'm now playing, there are plenty of opportunities to smash heretics apart with the old righteous hammer. I'm looking forward to this game eagerly, and basically any future Warhammer titles from Fat Shark. I think Vermintide 2 has been successful enough. They just had like an anniversary not too long ago where you had to kill, it's like the 5th year anniversary of Vermintide, and they had to kill 555,555,555 rats. And like the community did it within 4 or 5 days. So it shows you, even if you're killing a couple thousand enemies per round, it's a decent enough of a gameplay, of gaming community that seems likely that Vermintide 3 is in the works. So if you want to find me on stream, or Steam rather, just search for Hooves of Doom, all one word. I tend to play a lot of games solo with random players, but I'm always happy to join up for adventures. As always, thank you for watching. Please consider supporting the channel by commenting on the video, hitting that like button, and subscribing for more content. Thank you.